So we want to talk a little bit more about like other projects that you've done, just general your creative process. Love to start with like, where do you get inspiration from? So we talked about the inspiration from this coming from your lifestyle. Where do you get inspiration in general on the projects you're working on?
Yeah, I mean, for me, like any material is fair game, and so inspiration could really come from anything, but I try to be really conscious of the things that I'm using throughout my day. So like if I'm cooking a meal, I've used carrot peelers as high heels, and I've used like food and bread, and like those are some of the most interesting. I think food is probably one of like the most interesting materials to use because I try to create it in a way that I can eat it after, so I never want to like glue it, or even like it doesn't sew very well on a machine. I've tried.
I'm sure.
It doesn't work. And so I have found ways. I've made like a vest out of bread where I put like cording like through it, and then afterwards I like was able to pull it out, and I was able to make a sandwich out of it.
Okay.
So I just honestly, anything is inspirational to me. And I do love to go to like thrift stores and secondhand stores. And then also the outdoors, like I said, like being outside is really like a huge inspiration. I get a lot of like ideas being in nature.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I saw the hat made out of bread and the oven mitt made out of bread this morning. So fun. And what do you have any advice for other people on like how to stay attuned to their environment, to notice some of those things that they might not be noticing today?
I like to have a notebook, and I like to just like jot down like things that, whether it's like the color or the experience that I had while I was using it. Like we experience so much product in our daily lives, and I just think sometimes, you know, what if you take it out of that context and you put it into a different, you know, way of thinking. And I think that's really what started with my materials. And to be honest, now everything I look at and I'm like, oh, I could use that for a project. And at some point, you know, you end up collecting a lot of things.
I can imagine.
But yeah, no, I think just like being really aware of what you're using in the products, and like why you like them, and why they're important to you in your daily life, and like, but could you use them for something else?
Of
and
course.
I think that's really like a cool thing to do.
Absolutely. And this morning you suggested like, if you don't want something, asking your friends because they might want it and you could use it for something else.
Definitely. I was gonna say, like, is that something that you've done before? Have you ever like done a clothing swap with friends? Like that's a really like fun way of doing it.
Organize them in the office. I also, with my family, we'll just like pass things to one another, and
love that.
And you know, it feels so fresh and to you, but this, you know, someone else didn't want it anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
Gives it another life.
Exactly.
Yeah, extends the longevity of it. Yeah, that was great. Well, I'm just curious in general, you talked that you get a lot of samples and you collaborate with a lot of different brands and thinking about the projects they might want to do. How do you balance your own kind of creative projects and the things you're personally interested in with these projects that you're, you know, working with brands on doing as well?
Yeah, that's been kind of a new experience for me over the past couple of years, is really balancing like a brand's identity and sort of bringing in my own spin and, you know, what that looks like together. And I think something for me is like the trust that a brand definitely has when they come to work with me. I think I sort of lay out, you know, this is the kind of work that I do, and like they sort of know what to expect. And I do usually come with like a wild to mild mindset, and you know, I push them towards the wild because I'm like, you know, you could take the safer option, but what if we made something like really out there and really crazy? And I find like when brands put that trust in me and they do pick the wild option, it always pays off. And it's always like amazing to see a product that they've made that's usually like a very iconic product from the brand, like, you know, everyone has like bought it or experienced it in some way, and it's like to then see it kind of just like changed in a way that feels new and refreshing, and I think just gives them so much more viewership in a way that maybe they wouldn't have had otherwise.
Absolutely. Just like you're giving these items a fresh perspective, you're also giving their audience a fresh perspective and the brand a fresh perspective as well. That's so fun.
Yes.
I'd love to talk about how kind of sustainability comes into all of this. Can you talk a little bit about kind of how that inspires your work and how you keep that kind of at the core of what you're doing?
When I first started doing this work, I was working in corporate fashion, and you know, there was a lot of waste, and I think it was just seeing it firsthand made me feel like I was like, I need to do something about this. You know, I feel like I could participate in this in a way that could be helpful and samples, it's just like there's so much of it, and like, you know, merch and things that get built and made but like maybe don't make it to the finish line and don't get sold.
Of course.
Also returns is not something that's talked about a lot as well. It's like things get returned and then like a lot of things don't make it back onto the shelves.
Oh, wow.
So we've ended up with quite this issue when it comes to, you know, leftovers and waste. I really made it part of my mission to figure out some solutions for this, and it's been really cool because I wouldn't have thought brands would be so willing to invite me into their world and to see it firsthand. But for some reason, like, we've developed this level of trust, and it's never like judgment when I come in to see it. Like, I'm like, okay, let's figure out solutions. Like, what can we do with this? You know, even if it's a small scale thing. And that's really what I've been trying to teach them. It's like, it doesn't have to be thousands of something. Like, we can make, you know, 50 products, and that's okay. I know it's a step forward, and you learn from it, and you figure out what it took to make that, and like, how can you scale that process? So that's really been the goal of recent work, and trying to figure out like how I can help and be able to share, like, you know, projects that might be simple to make. Like, maybe we can do this at a larger scale.
And that note of scale, I also was inspired by how you were talking about how you're working with brands like Arc'teryx on creating these programs where they can have customers come and bring things to be fixed or to upcycle there. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Arc'teryx is a really good example because they've been able to create, I think, the best opportunity for people to be able to bring in something that they own, and it's less of a transaction and more of like a relationship between a brand and a consumer. Their jackets are made, you know, top quality. Like, they're really made for the conditions and like all types of weather. Yet somehow people manage to go outside and like find ways to like get holes in them or break a zipper, and like that thing, like, that happens in the outdoors. And so the fact that they have a place that they can go to be able to replace a zipper and not have to buy a whole new jacket, it's just like such a simple thing. I mean, in terms of actually implementing that and like really giving people like the space and like, you know, investing in it, I think is the biggest and hardest tool for these brands. But once you do it, it's self-sustaining, and people get really interested, and they're more likely to buy something from you because they know that they have a place that they can go.
They can fix them if they have issues instead of having to buy something new.
Exactly.
It's having that quality and knowing that you can count on that quality regardless of how active you get.
Exactly. And also they have like take back programs as well. So, you know, if your jacket is like beyond repair and it cannot be fixed, like that also happens. And so they'll get a discount and they can buy a new jacket, and then Arc'teryx will keep that jacket, and then either we'll use it for teaching a workshop, or we will, you know, find different ways to use it. We've done like installations for events and stuff like that. So we always find different ways to use it, even though it's not a jacket any longer, you know. Still good material.
That's the joy of upcycling, right?
Exactly.
And building on that, if you don't have like that corporate program, you also mentioned like learning to sew yourself. Can you tell us a little bit about how like everyday people like myself could learn to sew and bring some of this into our lives?
Definitely. Sewing has honestly changed my life in such a great way. I never thought that I would end up, you know, spending most of my day behind a sewing machine, but it's honestly, it's so refreshing to be able to use your hands to make something, and, you know, to be able to just make subtle changes or like adjustments to an article of clothing. If you like thrifting, which a lot of young people love to do that, you can make things fit you and hem your pants. And just once you learn how to hem your pants, don't tell people you know how to hem people's pants, because they'll just bring you them all the time. But I think sewing is such an accessible thing, because sewing machines honestly aren't that expensive anymore, and you can find them secondhand very easily. There's YouTube videos for days to be able to figure out any type of, you know, thing that you need to learn, or like basics of sewing to more complicated and anything in between. And that's honestly how I learned. I didn't go to fashion school. I learned pretty much from like friends that knew how to sew, and then YouTube University all day.
There's so much content out there. That's fantastic.
Exactly.
And whether it is just like repairing a rip or putting a button back on, or the small things, all the way to like making those changes you want. There's a lot you can do.
Yeah, definitely. Do you sew?
I do. I love to sew. I actually sewed my wedding dress.
Wait, that's so cool. That's so stressful.
It was an upcycle, actually. I used an old prop prom dress that my sister had, and I put lace on it and turned it into a wedding dress.
I love that. I have to see a picture of this.
I'll show you one after.
That's so cool.
Yeah, but and we also are talking about adding pockets to everything. I try to just add pockets to everything.
That's something that I just feel like women's clothing in general don't have enough pockets.
Yes.
Everyone's clothes in general don't have enough pockets.
Agreed.
So always add
Just like
more.
our pocket here,
Yes,
you gotta have more pockets.
Exactly.
Yes, love that.
I need places for my trinkets.
Yes, absolutely. So you talk about a lot about upcycling. Is that the same as recycling, or how are those two concepts different?
It's similar but different. So recycling, like I'd say, is more about, they find ways to keep things in circulation,
Yeah.
but the process can look a lot differently.
Yeah.
So, think about like a water bottle, like being able to that might stay as a water bottle, it might get broken down and they use the plastic and then remake it into another piece of plastic.
Yeah.
Whereas upcycling can be more of like extending the lifespan of something and really like giving it more longevity. At least that's the way I think of it. And then also it can be, taking something apart and turning it into something else.
Yeah.
But you're not really almost always breaking it down to the fibers. It's
Right.
just like maybe could be subtle changes or tweaks to be able to create a different item out of it.
I love that. Thanks for walking me through that. I was so curious as I was keep hearing this term upcycling. You also talked about upcycling, and especially you said during the pandemic you couldn't get a lot of new supplies, so you just upcycled the things you had already upcycled and changed them into new things. And as part of that, you have to learn to let go. I have such a tough time when I create something to let it go. How did you get comfortable with that?
I think it was out of necessity because I really needed the material, so I had started to have to cut up my projects. But I think in general, like the first time I did it, it was really hard, and then after that, I was like, it's for the best. Like it's only gonna help me more to be able to learn more skills.
Yeah.
And also something I always tell myself is like, I've made it before, and I can make it again.
It's true.
I can always remake this piece if I feel like it was better than it like before, which it never really is. I never usually go backwards. I usually just keep going forward.
Of course.
And I've used some of the material I've used 10 different projects at this point. And I use it's funny, the high heels that I make, I use the same heel every time and I just keep replacing the heel. It just goes to show how much more you can do with it.
Absolutely. And I think that's what I love about your description of rapid prototyping, your rapid prototyping, just because you realize as you keep pushing and keep pushing, you can come up with more and more and more if you kind of take that mindset to it.
Definitely. And I think we could all take something out of that, whether you're applying that to sewing or to programming or anything. It's coming up with ideas doesn't have to be the final product in mind. Just make stuff to make stuff sometimes and enjoy the process of it, learn from it, fail, and there's so much you can take away from that experience. And those little projects, those personal projects you do can help inspire something really amazing down the line.
Absolutely, that's your journey, right?
Yes,
you started it all as a personal project, right?
Exactly, and it still is. I try to keep it. I try to maintain it as a person, even though it is work, and it's I have this opportunity to make it a business. But at the end of the day, I still love it because it's still fun, and I learn a lot, and it's new and cool every time.
Well, and we learn a lot from you too, so we appreciate that.
Thank you.
I want to talk about, your portfolio of projects is so extensive. Do you have any favorites that stand out among all the things you've created?
In terms of the projects I've made that really stand out to me, one goes back to one of my earliest projects. I showed it in my presentation, but I made a shoe out of a volleyball.
Yeah.
And for me, it's not even so much about the shoe, and it's kind of doesn't, of all the projects I made, when you look at it, you're like, oh, it's cool. But to me, I look at it, I was like, that was the first time I saw this spherical object turned into a shoe.
Right.
And it didn't really take that much adjusting. I opened up some of the seams and kind of molded it and sort of was putting my foot in it, and it kind of took the shape. And then I used the stitch holes that were already in the volleyball to sew it back closed. So I didn't actually really add anything. I didn't really change anything. It just was already there.
Okay.
And I think that was just such an aha moment where I was maybe you don't need to, force it. Sometimes it's right there in front of you.
Absolutely. And that's seeing the hidden potential in things, right?
Yeah.
I'm curious, when you're building something, do you ever panic if it's not quite going the way that you hoped it would?
All the time, literally every day. I think we would not be designers if we weren't second guessing everything we were doing.
That's fair.
I've had a couple projects where I've abandoned it.
Okay.
And then years later come back to it.
Oh, really?
A lot, actually. Like quite a few.
Wow.
I have like bins of like, I call it like my graveyard.
Okay.
And like, it's always fair game for material, because I'm like, if I need a fleece that's purple, I'm gonna take it apart. Like,
Right.
like that's fine. But I've had like a couple projects where it's just like, I need to sit on it for a while, and maybe I just didn't have the skill set at that point, or maybe I just wasn't like seeing it correctly, and then a couple years went by and I'm like, yeah, this makes so much more sense to me now. And then like other times when I get into creative blocks, I mean, it just helps me to take a step away and like maybe do something else that's creative, like paint or crochet or go for a walk, you know, other things like that. So that helps me get through it.
Okay. So even very successful designers like yourself still
1000%. There's no way of me convincing anybody that like I don't deal with that on a daily basis.
Right. Okay, that's good to know. Good to know. Lovely. I also want to talk about, so this is a swag item that you turned in. It was Figma swag. Do you, just your personal opinions, favorite corporate swag?
It's the best corporate swag.
No, is like, what are the corporate swag that, like, your favorite items you've seen? Like, what's the coolest corporate swag you've seen?
I mean, well, being at this conference has like blown my mind, because I did not realize like the level of, I definitely have seen the merch. I've seen people wearing the merch like out and about, but actually being here and seeing it in real life, the line for the merch booth, I was like, wow, this is crazy. Like, I mean, for me, merch, I like when brands create stuff that can be multifunctional, like that you can wear different ways, but like it really is something that you can use. And so like something that is like an everyday tote that has a lot of pockets, and you know, or is just really fun and exciting and has graphics, and you know, that's really what I look for in a merch item. So you guys definitely provided a lot of that for people.
Wasn't looking for compliments there. I'm glad to hear
this is all honesty.
Got the stamp of approval, Nicole's stamp of approval. That's great. Lovely. Any swag that you see like worst corporate swag?
Ooh, any like the puffer vest that has just like the logo on it, like not calling anybody out, but
no, there was a phase where those were everywhere.
There was a phase, it's been done, and I find a lot of those in thrift stores. I'm just gonna say that right now.
I bet you do, I bet you do.
I just take out the logo and I use the rest of the material.
I don't know if you can tell us, but are there any projects that like you're thinking about working on personally that you're excited about, or anything that's to come?
Yeah, so I'm kind of getting into this new space of like showing my work in museums, which isn't something I ever thought I'd be able to do, and so that's been really awesome.
Okay.
Kind of going more like larger scale and trying to find ways of doing my work within like the furniture space and interior space. So that's what's coming up, and then right now I've actually just made a jacket out of ice skates.
Oh my gosh.
And that was really intense, and it's really heavy, and there's like blades on it. So I'll keep you posted on how that like shapes up, but in the process, almost done with it, but it's pretty wild.
What was the inspiration for that one?
Oh, I mean, well, I grew up ice skating. I love ice skating still. It's so fun. It's such a fun sport, but I love the skate covers. I like anything like that. Like, I don't know why, it's just like something really cool about it, and they're all different, and I started seeing them a lot like in the thrift stores. And then I was like, well, what if I just make something with the ice skates? So then I used like the upper material. It was really challenging to take apart. Oh my God. I was like with blades, and like I was like sawing it off. It's like, it's really literally a saw. I'll put it in the vise with the saw. It's not great, and it's also really thick too. So, and then I attach the blades like back onto it. So it's really intense. It's a very heavy piece.
Yes, and what's the use of it? Are you gonna,
It's more, I think it could be more of like a museum piece. I do lend a lot of pieces for like magazines and editorials, so like for higher fashion photo shoots and stuff. So that's kind of like more of where I can see it going.
I love that. I can see it coming out this winter.
Yeah, exactly. Coming soon.
Yes, the winter season coming soon.